All right, I hope you can grab your tea, your water, and this life-giving liquid coffee. Okay, we have more programming coming your way, so buckle up. To start, let me introduce another story of flourishing in action, presented by the Museum for the United Nations. Now, their Global We program is the world's largest conversation made possible by a network of global portals that bring people together across borders, cultures, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Now, these portals are made from repurposed shipping containers fitted with large screens and high-quality audio to allow for eye-to-eye, life-size conversations between participants. Let's take a look.
Our world needs change. It needs greater empathy, systemic transformations, individual change, and meaningful action. We at the Museum for the United Nations, UN Live, unleash the power of popular culture and conversations to include, inspire, and engage people towards positive action and a sense of global belonging, of being part of a global we, and with that, a reason to act on a shared positive future. Through our many portals with immersive technology, our Global We platform connects people across geographies, ages, issues, and influence. We meet people where they are to discuss the world's challenges and identify solutions, amplify often unheard voices, and bring insights to global decision makers. It has so far been the world's largest conversation on climate action, with more than 10,000 participants globally. Now, we're expanding the conversation, reaching further and making a bigger impact, addressing a wider range of issues. For people and planet, for empathy and action, for and with younger generations and the most affected, sharing and shaping a more hopeful future. Join us as we expand the conversation and inspire action, because now, more than ever, the world needs a global we.
A grande sacada do projeto é que eles organizam as conversas durante esse intervalo, né, dentro do ano, por perguntas muito simples. Então a gente teve perguntas, por exemplo, o que te traz esperança? Isso foi de um mês. Do outro mês foi, o que é casa para você? São perguntas muito simples, mas que no final das contas a gente acaba entrando nessa conversa sobre mudanças climáticas, porque tá tudo conectado, né? A nossa casa está conectada com o meio ambiente. A gente falou muito sobre moradia irregular, por exemplo, sistema de esgoto, deslizamento.
A maioria das pessoas que a gente tem convidado para realizar conversas e conexões aqui no portal são pessoas de periferia, tá ligado? Então, por si só, né, tá dando a oportunidade para jovens de quebrada encostar e se conectar com outras pessoas ao redor do mundo. Está sendo exposto, né? Que exposure é uma palavra para mim que é muito importante. Ser exposto a coisas diferentes, né? Porque a gente é o que a gente vê, o que a gente vivencia.
Então, o impacto que eu vi nesse projeto, nas pessoas convidadas que entraram, né? Vieram para cá, foi a descoberta de que existe vida, cultura, história, memória para além do que já existe aqui, que não está só nos livros, não está só no Google. Por exemplo, teve uma amiga minha que veio aqui, ela é uma mulher preta, e ela falou assim, falar com pessoas pretas de outros territórios em inglês, pra mim foi completamente transformador, porque eu nunca tinha visto ninguém, tipo, com a minha cor, tipo, falando inglês, assim, ter essa viagem, assim, né? Eu nunca me conectei com essas pessoas.
A partir do momento que a gente cria um repertório para os jovens, passando por conversas aqui com diversas pessoas ao redor do mundo, em um outro idioma, isso com certeza tem um impacto muito positivo de expansão mental, de possibilidades, né, mano?
Eu acho que todos nós que estamos aqui, seres viventes, né, atuando no território, tentando compreender quais são as problemáticas, né, para conseguir se relacionar melhor com elas, temos uma curiosidade genuína, né? De quais são as outras resoluções, quais são as outras pessoas, o que mais tem para além disso aqui que eu consigo enxergar, que é o meu horizonte, né? O portal conseguiu trazer de forma palpável essa capacidade de você olhar para além desse horizonte, que é o nosso horizonte comum.
If we talk about the important matters in life,
que para mí es importante decirle a mi hijo que lo amo,
that for me it's important to tell my son that I love him,
a mi familia que la amo,
to tell my family that I love them,
y gracias por todo lo que me ha dado,
and to be thankful for them for all the opportunities that they have brought to me.
A partir de ahí yo empiezo a crecer y a ser empático con la gente de afuera.
From there, I start filling my glass, with love. And then I can share that with the world.
Porque yo también le puedo dar.
I've grown up seeing that. That is something that's just normal, it's general. That's why Rwanda is clean and everything. And so for me, that's it's something that has to be done, something that I do because I've grown up seeing it done. And so that's where I think the love for the environment and taking care of the environment came from. Because every Saturday, my parents would wake up and go, and then I'd tag along.
Take a reflection and say, okay, this is who I really want to be. This is the type of relationships I want to cultivate with myself first and foremost, so I can be the best version of myself, even for the people that I meet. So I think a lot of people have disconnected so much from reality because they caught into this system, and we need to make sure that we become more loud in showing love.
Power through a community that told them they were beautiful and they were powerful, to watch that change. And now I know their grandchildren and their children, and I see such a different world. And so I wonder what the role of love, in the way I've defined it, not in a soft way, but in a way that's very focused on our connection to each other, is connected to activism and empowerment.
There are many situations that a little bit of empathy could fix, but we've become a society that is distracted by a lot of different things, and a lot of these distractions have forced us to look at ourselves first and everybody else after, if at all. So my view is that if we could inject a little bit of empathy, firstly, personally, right, inject a little bit of empathy, but try and display that empathy in society and let it take effect and get into the hearts of people, then that
not
would
to
be
get validated but to actually start bringing community in between us. And also speaking about empathy, it's not new, but it's something that we need to remind each other each day, right? We need to wake up every day and keep that in our minds. And also what you were saying about the opportunity of being vulnerable, that especially for me,
how we used to live and be as humans. I think we used to be a lot more community. Well, I mean, we know for a fact we used to be a lot more community oriented and focused, and it takes a village kind of approach. Everyone with everything, with childcare, with sourcing materials, with sourcing food, with medicine, as opposed to now we're on the opposite end of that, or on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, highly individualized, every man for himself. Everyone, lives in their own home, very separate, kind of not a lot of resources maybe shared amongst a community.
It's time for a big step, right? I want things to move, but they're not moving. So when I hear people doing great things like that in Kenya, in South Africa, and whatever, I find that beautiful, because we're finally making the big step we need to take care of our environment and raise awareness generally to everybody, so that everybody can start caring.
Actually, you might have just really hit the nail, because even though we are speaking to each other, we are not just like speaking to each other in the privacy of our homes, right? Or in a cafe. We are doing it through these mediums where our voices do matter, and we are trying to present our concerns to the global leaders.
I absolutely loved that. The Museum for the United Nations, the Global We program. I hope you really were inspired by that. I now want to welcome the FETSA Institute, who has organized this plenary session on solidarity in love as a foundation for shared flourishing. Please help me welcome Mohammed, who's the Senior Program Officer with the FETSA Institute, along with his esteemed panelists, invited panelists. Please give them a warm welcome.
Thank you, Reddy. Love is relational and experiential. When people talk about love, they say things like, I am touched, something awakened in me, I am enveloped, and much more. Such experiences are not easy to forget. Hold on to that thought for a bit. We have an opening practice for you, Matt.
Thank you, Mohammed. So in order to start this session, it would be helpful for us to do a bit of a grounding practice. And the science suggests that gratitude is an important contributor to human flourishing. And so if we reflect on how do we flourish, people are always involved in that. A person becomes a person through other persons. In the film A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, a fictionalized account of the children's television show host Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, there's a pivotal scene in which a journalist, a very disgruntled person, is sort of complaining to Fred Rogers. And Fred says to him, this is really the turning point in the movie, would you take, along with me, 1 minute to think of all the people who have loved you into being? 1 minute, and I'll watch the time. So I would like to invite us to take this minute together to reflect on the people who have loved us into being. So if it's comfortable in a dignified posture, you're welcome to close your eyes or soften your gaze, and maybe call to mind even just one person who has loved you into being. And I will watch the time for a minute. Call into your mind's eye somebody who has really nurtured you, who has helped you to become the person that you are becoming. And envision them in your imagination just for a moment. Think about something specifically that they have done to help you become your best self. And given that memory, maybe even offer a silent word of gratitude for what they have done. And know that if they were aware that you were grateful in this moment for how they have loved you into being, that would make them very happy as well. Okay, thank you. That's our 1 minute.
Thank you.
Thank you. As I said, love, you may have experienced it. Love is not easy to forget. With that, I would like to introduce our distinguished panelists. We have Dr. William Vendley, Vice President of World Religions and Spirituality at the FETSA Institute, and my dear colleague. Dr. Matthew Lee, Professor of the Social Sciences and Humanities at the Institute for Studies of Religion at Baylor University, Research Associate at the Flourishing Network Director, Research Associate and Flourishing Network Director, Harvard University Human Flourishing Program. And we had a third panelist, Dr. Rana Dejani, who was not able to join us. So let me say a few things about the panel. In this panel, we'll be talking about the role of worldview, materialist, holistic, in shaping how we understand well-being and flourishing, research and emerging trends. In particular, we will highlight the materialist worldview that undergirds the current predominant discourse on human flourishing. We'll also point out where shifts are taking place that propose a holistic approach to human flourishing, and will showcase a worldview grounded in love and wholeness that includes a material understanding of human flourishing, but transcends it. We need a holistic grounding now as the world is polarized more than ever and faces multiple crises that are results of narrow worldviews. So in many ways, this panel is very timely, and we have the distinguished panelists who have studied this for a long time and who are here to share their thoughts and experiences with us. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function. I will remind you again, probably later. But now, as a transition, we have an exercise for you. What does love mean to you? Please write 1 to 3 words about what love means to you. What does love mean to you? And as you think about words to write in the chat, we will run a slideshow that describes love, different kinds of love. I hope you found some inspiring words. Let's see what you wrote. We have a word cloud generator and would like to display the result of what you wrote in the chat. Compassion, supported. Patience, respect. Inclusive, grounded in truth. Oh, these are wonderful words. We'll probably come back to this toward the end of our session. For now, let's move on to the panel and the panel questions. I have a question for Bill. How does materialism constrain the full flourishing of all? What difference would solidarity in love make?
Well, first of all, thank you, Mohammed and Matt. It's a joy to be with you. And we're sorry that Dr. Rana is not with us. She's just an extraordinary woman. And greetings to all who are present in this session. The question is a big one. How does materialism constrain the full flourishing of all? What difference would solidarity and love make? The best I can do is to offer us a few little facets and know that those will echo in you in ways that are stimulating your own reflection and creativity. Let's begin by recognizing, although I think we may be in the early stages of altering our public story, but today's public story, the one that's really dominating our public institutions and our media, is the reductive materialistic story. Everything, all of reality is reduced to some kind of material explanation. Now, I'm going to suggest that this is actually, if we think about it carefully, is actually a profoundly lonely story. It teaches us that matter is essentially dead. Nature is a machine. And the mind just an emergent physical property of an intrinsically meaningless and purposeless universe. This story, formally, the reductive story, has no place for the sacred, but as the little word cloud and the beautiful slides point us, what if your center and my center and the center of all existence, what I'll call the full community of being, is centered in the sacred? What then doesn't fit within the story? And we don't see very easily what's not in our story. And the story then has no place for sacred mystery, and it misses that dimension of us and of the earth and the web of life and our societies. In short, today's public story, at least the hardest version of it, has no place for our own hearts. It alienates them from their deepest center, our deepest centers. And it has no place for the incredibly beautiful, live, and dynamic earth we live on, which is saturated, really, in sacred mystery. So what about the difference that love makes? It's stunning because it addresses directly the double alienation that I just tried to hint at, the alienation of our deepest selves. If we would honor, if a new story could be told that could include the love that lies at the sacred, at the heart of the sacred, we would find our own hearts embraced by that shared story. And we would see that the very community of being, the other members, every other person, the earth and its web of life, we ourselves are all within our own different respective interpretations of the sacred. It would also, so it would free us from alienation from ourselves, and it would also allow us to see the splendor of the full community of being itself. So what about solidarity and love? Well, the word solidarity is the key here. What it suggests is that there are different paths into the love that lies at the heart of sacred mystery. Maybe previously, and regretfully even somewhat today, there can be hostility against the very communities that have their own respective paths into the love that lies at the heart of sacred mystery. That's changing and changing dramatically. Almost 3 decades of multi-religious work in over 90 countries taught me that men and women, good people of all different traditions, are standing together shoulder to shoulder, keeping their own respective paths into the sacred, but finding solidarity of common cause. And this is something that I think we can celebrate. Let each tradition and each person of conscience, maybe not associated with the tradition, honor their path into sacred mystery and the love that lies at its heart, but then use that experience of love, which is most intimate to them, as the grounds for solidarity and love with all other persons for our shared flourishing, our relational flourishing in the full community of being. I emphasize shared flourishing. And if it's shared, then your flourishing is also mine, and mine is also yours. And any injury to any of our flourishings in the full community of being is an injury to all of us. But the inverse is true as well. So, Mohammed, I think it makes a radical difference. And I think that we can feel the emergence of this tremendous hunger to reclaim our centers and reclaim the center, the sacred center of the full community of being. So I'm hopeful that we're on our way as a human family. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Matt, what has been the evolution of the understanding and study of flourishing? What is emerging right now? Has love been central to the emerging work, explicitly or implicitly?
Well, thank you, Mohammed, for those questions, and Bill for setting up what I have to say so beautifully. My answer to the question about the evolution of the study of flourishing is based on conversations I've had with scholars and leaders across sectors and around the world who have gravitated away from their own narrow specializations and towards flourishing as a more holistic construct. The deepest understanding of flourishing originated in the wisdom traditions of the indigenous groups, organized religions, and philosophical systems that inform the humanities disciplines. Many of these traditions emphasize virtue and ethics. A flourishing life is a good life, they say, one that expresses moral goodness, but not necessarily a life free from suffering. Indeed, the more we love, the more we become vulnerable to the suffering of the people and other beings and planet that we care about. The phrase wholeness amidst adversity, or perhaps the fullness of life, might capture some of the timeless wisdom that's been passed down for generations. The science of flourishing that has emerged relatively recently has been partly informed by this wisdom, but at times does not fully reflect a holistic approach. One contribution of analytical science is a precise understanding of particular aspects or domains of flourishing. For example, there's a large body of scientific literature on the domain of meaning and purpose that has revealed many important insights, especially in light of the challenges posed to the contemporary pursuit of meaning due to the materialistic reductionism that Bill so eloquently described. But in general, I believe that we're now seeing convergent thinking across sectors that's increasingly supporting a holistic worldview. It's sort of a return to the ancient wisdom. Yeah. In the business sector, for example, where there was once a limited focus on wellness, defined largely in terms of good physical health, careful financial planning, and the availability of individual counseling services for mental health difficulties, but not for mental health flourishing. We now see a concern for an expanded set of domains of what is generally being called well-being, including an intention to create a higher level of meaning and purpose in the workplace. And some groups and organizations are moving in the direction of an even more interconnected sense of what we would call flourishing across domains and levels. We might call this ecosystem-wide flourishing, where ecosystems include the natural environment, but also social and spiritual environments as well. Such flourishing remains largely aspirational, but it's good to aim high. So what's emerging right now is the recognition that despite our important gains in rigorous knowledge within specialized and often reductionist fields, what has been lost is a sense of holistic interconnection that many of the ancient traditions emphasized, including the spiritual domain. At the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard, to take just one example, and within the Flourishing network that we host, we've promoted an understanding of flourishing that includes the subjective and objective well-being of the individual, but that is connected to the well-being of all of the contexts in which the individual is embedded and to which the individual contributes. So at the broadest level, this would include the planet and all of its inhabitants. And for the spiritually inclined, which is the majority of the world's population, a sacred narrative that gives the pursuit of flourishing a deeper meaning. In this view, it may be possible for the individual to experience subjective well-being at the expense of others or planet, or in violation of sacred norms. But we would not call that flourishing. Flourishing, therefore, involves the creation of processes and lifestyles that achieve intrapersonal, interpersonal, and interspecies harmony based on the recognition of the reality of interconnection, sometimes called interbeing, grounded in the practice of virtue. And virtue counsels against excess or deficiency in any domain or at any level. So again, it's about harmony. The approach we've taken in the Flourishing Network, which all participants in this conference are warmly invited to join, is to create social containers that help people explore these possibilities. Of course, our level of success is dependent on the degree of alignment with this shared purpose and many other factors. But we're now collaborating with the Presencing Institute to help the emerging global ecosystem for flourishing to see itself so that deep institutional transformation becomes more possible. This collaboration is just beginning to envision a structure and process, so please join us. How has love been central to this emerging work, either explicitly or implicitly? Love is always implicitly present in this work because, as the psychologist John Rempel put it, the goal of love is, quote, to promote the well-being of the loved one, end quote. This is worth repeating. The goal of love is to promote the well-being of the loved one. So love is intrinsically bound up with the promotion of flourishing. And as the quotes in the slide deck we saw earlier demonstrated, the loved one could be a person, a place, all creation, or the sacred. Research shows that the promotion of well-being is essential across all types of love, including romantic, parental, neighborly, spiritual, and so on. This is the essence. We don't mean jealous love, violent love, or even graveyard love. To borrow the memorable words of Joyce, a woman serving a life sentence in prison who is interviewed by Laura Lempert. These forms of pseudo-love are closer to the meaning of the word hatred than to the promotion of domains of well-being that, taken collectively, might move us in the direction of full flourishing. As Joyce put it, quote, "The woman I am today mourns the girl I was when I committed my crime," end quote. In other words, the girl was participating in a cycle of hate, but the woman that has emerged is participating in a cycle of love. This kind of transformation is my hope for a loving science in the service of shared flourishing that is beginning to emerge. We have a way to go, but we can learn from the ancient wisdom traditions and their contemporary iterations that posit a spiritual source of love energy that drives flourishing, again, as suggested in some of the quotes in that slide deck. In an article written by some of my colleagues at Baylor University and their collaborators at the Minnesota Department of Corrections and University of North Florida, a prison seminary director was quoted as saying, and I'll quote here, "First, you have to stop dying. Stop dying within yourself so that you can help others stop dying." And as a prison inmate minister in this same study put it, quote, "Look, I died yesterday. I serve today. Until you realize that you've sinned against the law of love, all you produce are prisoners of war. That prisoner has not been set free to enter into loving relationships," end quote. Is there really a law of love that helps us stop dying so that we can help others stop dying and help the planet stop dying? This seems to be an urgent question that the leading edge of the emerging field is beginning to see more clearly as it loosens the constraints of reductionism. As Otto Scharmer, co-founder of the previously mentioned Presencing Institute, put it, the necessary movement is from, quote, accessing our ignorance to accessing our love. Or as Layli Mapiran, director of the Wellesley Centers for Women, might suggest, the essence of the work is to build, quote, love-based technologies of change. It is significant that research that was once conducted using other labels is now being narrated in terms of the connection between love and shared flourishing. This is sometimes referred to as compassionate love, loving kindness, shalom, caritas, sewa in Tibetan, agape, charity, or in the words of Stephen Post in his book, Dignity for the Deeply Forgetful People, loving care. According to Post, loving care is the hub of a wheel that has many spokes. These spokes are modulations of love, and they include forgiveness, gratitude, celebration, helping, listening, respect, and more. In other words, these are all works of love, and all of them are centrally related to the co-creation of shared flourishing, or what the folks in the US civil rights movement called beloved community. And I know I have only 1 minute left, so I'll wrap up. Martin Luther King Jr. was on the mark when he stated that, quote, what is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, unquote. Unskillful expressions of love that do not accomplish justice also fail to promote shared flourishing. Selfish expressions of in-group love tend to foster an out-group antagonism that ultimately undermines the aspirations of the in-group itself. The field is seeing that there is no escape from interbeing, nor should we desire such escape. Love for all, without exception, is required to break the selfish and hate-filled cycle and foster shared flourishing. Or as business professor Jim Ritchie Dunham told me, what you truly love, you want for everyone, everywhere, every time. Later in the same speech about powerful love doing justice, Martin Luther King put it this way, if you're seeking the highest good, I think you can find it through love. And that a person who loves has the key that unlocks the door of the meaning of ultimate reality. I'll close with a quote attributed to Rumi, the 13th century poet and Sufi mystic, which offers insight into the nature of love in its spiritual essence. Goodbyes are only for those who love with their eyes, because for those who love with heart and soul, there's no such thing as separation. This is the emerging spirit that characterizes solidarity and love for shared flourishing. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I think what you said about stop dying and not dying kind of resonates with Viktor Frankl's The Meaning of Life, which vividly portrays cases of people checking out. With that, let me move on to the next question. This is for Bill. Take about 2 or 3 minutes to talk about how do we bring love into the conversation of flourishing.
Okay. Thank you, Matt, so much for your remarks. And Mohammed, thanks for the question. Well, I'll just make a few little points that that I find helpful personally. The first way is without words. When you're in conversation with people, try it as an experiment. Try to intentionally love them, not necessarily putting that into word. Attention is a kind of love, and give the attention to the actual person who is speaking. That includes their words, but it's mysteriously bigger than that. So try that. Listen for any evidence of their caring, any evidence of glimmers of beauty. It can even come in an area of hurt or anger, but attend to where the passion flows and the care is present. 3, potentially build on that in your conversation with them. You know, when we have conversations, we can choose to what we want to respond with, but try it as an experiment. Go back to where you perceived that deep sense of care, that sense of openness to beauty. Then, with all sensitivity, decide when and occasionally whether or not, or maybe not, to actually put that in language. Rather than raising it as simply a topic, I would say try to express it, see if that's appropriate, do it in a way that's appropriate. The shyness and modesty of comportment about deep things with people of all sorts of different relationships is extremely appealing to me. But the boldness of being able to declare love when that's deemed appropriate is liberating. I worked, as I mentioned, almost 3 decades in interreligious work all around the earth. There was an extraordinary commerce of love, but not always spoken as overtly as today I've learned to do late in my years. And so those are my little reflections for us.
Thank you, Bill. I know you have touched on, Matt, on this question of how we bring love to the conversation of flourishing. But do you have a couple of things to add to that?
Yes, I would say what we've been experimenting with in the Flourishing Network is this motto that one of the colleges at UC Santa Cruz has offered to the world, which is that our goal is the pursuit of truth in the company of friends. And when you have a large group, over 300 members now, it's difficult to always treat each other as deep friends, but we aspire to that. So I say that we try to live in the subjunctive. We live in as if, what might be possible. And we take inspiration from other people who live in the subjunctive. And one peace worker has this wonderful, inspiring quote that I would love to share. She was saying at the time, dodging bullets left and right, when we work to help people, the bullets have to avoid us because we can never avoid the bullets. When we have goodwill and great love, when our only aim is to help those in distress, I believe that there's a kind of magnetism, the energy of goodness that protects us from being hit by the bullets. We need only to be serene. Well, that's great as far as it goes. But then she says, then even if a bullet hits us, we can accept it calmly, knowing that everyone has to die one day. And if we die in service, we can die with a smile, without fear. So you live as if until you're hit by the bullet. And in her case, the bullet didn't come. So that's the way that we try to practice. And as Martin Luther King said, we build community even as we know that we're destroying community. So we live as if it's possible. And we feel that we are more inspired by the as if than the reductionist as is.
Thank you, Matt. We have a couple of interesting questions I would like for you to address from the audience. The first one, I would like to address it to Bill. In the context of fostering solidarity in love, how do the highlighted scientific abstracts contribute to our understanding of creating environments that support shared flourishing? And what practical insights or applications can be drawn from these abstracts for building stronger connections and unity in diverse communities?
Well, it's a big question. It's a good question. Wonderful.
It's a long question.
Yeah, no, but it's wonderful. I think the first thing, and it echoes all the way back to your first question, Mohammed, on the reductive materialist story that we're all struggling to find our way through. The first issue for us to recognize is that although it's at the top end of the most self-reflective areas of science possible, there is and will continue to be a stunning overlap between what I'll call the scientific mode of inquiry, which is an exquisitely powerful and beautiful mode of inquiry, and the spiritual mode of inquiry. There is no longer going to be, oh, you scientists, you have your domain, and you religious people, you have your domains, and those are separate domains. And so we'll have peace at too high of a price, that we don't criticize each other particularly, but because there's no overlap, but there is an overlap. There's an overlap in the human heart and in the human mind. So today you have physicists, this has gone on for 100 years, and now you have biologists and you have others who begin to say reductive materialism distorts the scientific data, and the very practice of science itself, the activities of doing science, involve a commitment to the full intelligibility of reality, even if I only approach it partially. And the resonance between the intelligible and the intellect, these are fundamentally religious positions that relate not directly to the performance of science, but they are presumed by science. So from this, there is this emergence of a new natural philosophy in which science recognizes that it too is inquiring into unfathomable mystery itself. So I think that's a big thing that we're all a part of today. Then the second part of the question is, I'm really going to reserve it for Matt. Matt's in the front lines of how the empirical studies are beginning to make extremely clear that love is integral to flourishing.
Thank you, Bill. I have one more question. You can add to what Bill said, Matt, if you want, but there's another question. How can love be measured? If you can, in 1 minute or so, respond to that question.
Well, love has been measured in a variety of ways. We have a project at the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard right now on the construct and assessment of interpersonal love. So we're limited to a particular type of love, but we have a series of survey questions that aims to assess the extent to which people are contributing to the good of the beloved, and also desiring some form of healthy way of relating to the other, to the beloved. And so there's a variety of ways that you can ask questions about this. You can observe this in action. And when you do this, you, however measured, whatever tool, however reductionistic and only partial the tool might be, you see enormous effects later in life. There's a great study by my colleagues looking at the experience of parental love during adolescence, and then a decade later in young adulthood, what are the implications for the flourishing across a variety of domains. And this is really important to flourishing later in life. So even however crudely measured by one methodology, the effects are very robust. So if we had better measures and different ways of triangulating across types of measures, modes of inquiry, we would have even more. So it's encouraging, but we have more work to do.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Bill and Matt. To learn more about the works of our two panelists, you can visit the resource gallery. Where do we go from here? Both Bill and Matt highlighted 3 different levels of how we can approach this. One is to sort of address this materialist reductionist worldview and probably come up with a different worldview that stresses the shared solidarity in love. And then the second one is research. I think research gives us a very powerful tool to change the narrative itself. So there is new emerging research that Matt talked about. I think that we should seriously strengthen the kind of research that is emerging. And the third one is cultural. In our workplaces, Matt mentioned that there are a few workplaces that are already practicing this. Embodying this idea of love and solidarity in our workplaces. And within that, Matt also talked about ecosystemic change. We need to embody it within our culture and let it flourish and grow. So with that, I would like to say thank you for coming and listening to us. And if we have a minute, we might be able to show you the word cloud, but if not, thank you and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Terrific.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so very much. What a stimulating panel discussion, expertly moderated by Mohammed. We thank you so much. for all those thought-provoking reflections. I really felt centered as I listened to you talking about solidarity in love as a foundation for shared flourishing. Thank you. So next, we have another scientific abstract presentation. Let's hear from Brenda Ochukwu with the Shamiri Institute.
Hello, my name is Brenda Ochukwu, and I will be presenting on behalf of the Shamiri Institute, which is a nonprofit organization based in Kenya, whose mission is to enable African youth to thrive. And we do this by designing, testing, and scaling interventions to improve the mental health of Kenyan adolescents. In this presentation, I will be discussing findings from a trial in which we investigated the long-term impact of our intervention on livelihoods of Kenyan adolescents. So to begin, I'll just begin with an overview of poverty and mental health. So the literature does indicate that there is an association between poverty and mental health, and it does seem that this association is bidirectional. So you find that poverty can increase one's likelihood of being exposed to environmental stressors, which may worsen their mental health. But likewise, poor mental health can significantly impair people's ability to function well in their jobs, in education, which can increase their vulnerability to poverty. And with this association, then there might be a role for interventions that improve the mental health of individuals in decreasing their likelihood of falling into poverty or increasing their chances of breaking out of poverty. So with this in mind, we wanted to see whether one of our interventions called Shamiri intervention improves the livelihoods of Kenyan youths. The Shamiri intervention is designed based on principles that have been tested and found to be effective in improving the mental health of adolescents. And these are 3 principles. The first is growth mindset, which basically encourages individuals to view their challenges and limitations as opportunities for growth, as opposed to viewing them as challenges that they cannot overcome. The second element is gratitude, or the ability to focus on the positives and be grateful. And the third is values affirmation, which encourages individuals to reflect on the things that are of most importance to them and to find ways to cultivate these things in their day-to-day lives. So these 3 elements comprise the Shamiri intervention, and it has been tested in previous trials and found to be effective at reducing depression and anxiety symptoms of Kenyan adolescents. So in this trial, we wanted to investigate whether their effects on the mental health of adolescents can actually impact indirectly their livelihood outcomes. So in terms of the study design, this trial was a long-term follow-up of one of our previous trials, which had 413 participants. And this trial investigated the effects of the Shamiri intervention compared to an active control. And the active control group was a study skill control group in which students learned skills such as note-taking, the study cycles, and other strategies to improve their study skills. In this trial, we found that although both the intervention group and the control group saw reductions in their mental health symptoms or mental illness symptoms, depression and anxiety to be precise, the intervention group did outperform the control group. So this was the long-term follow-up of that. And what we did, we had already collected baseline, midpoint and endpoint data, as well as 2-week and 7-month follow-up. So in this trial, we tracked down participants for 3 to 4 year follow-up. And the outcomes that we assessed to kind of get an understanding of livelihoods was education, labor market, or whether participants were employed and what were their average wages, migration history. So did they move out of their family home, and what were their reasons for migrating? Financial inclusion, which included things such as, do they own a bank account? Do they have a savings account? Social connections, which is essentially where do they have any meaningful relationships in their lives, as well as long-term mental health. So we did find mixed results. What was quite promising was that we found that the Shamiri intervention was associated with improvements in various livelihood outcomes. So we found that youth in the intervention group were more likely to save in a mobile banking and SACCO than those in the control group. Likewise, we found that the intervention group had an increased probability of not living with their family, so they were more likely to migrate. And we also found that the intervention group had a higher number of frequently contacted close friends. But we did see that, as you can see in the graph, over time, although, and this graph just basically shows the Shamiri intervention group, which is the blue line, and the study skills control group, which was it's a red line. It just shows that symptoms decline from baseline, which is the first time point, all the way up to 7-month follow-up. So that's baseline to endpoint, 2-week follow-up, and 7-month follow-up. But then we did see that symptoms started to sort of come back in the 3-year follow-up time point. What we did see was that we also did experience quite a significant amount of attrition. So we were only able to trace 192 out of the original 413 participants, indicating a 54% attrition rate. So this may have resulted in an inability to detect smaller effects on various other livelihood outcomes that I had mentioned previously. So things such as education and other outcomes that did not see significant differences. So in terms of conclusions, we saw some promising findings. So the first was that the Shamiri intervention group may have a role in promoting youth independence. So this is based on the finding that youth who participated in the Shamiri intervention were more likely to migrate and move out of their family home. They were also more likely to register and save in mobile banking and SACCOs, which indicated possible improvement in financial inclusion. We found that treatment effects seemed to diminish over time, so this may indicate a need for booster sessions or complementary interventions so that we were able to maintain the effects of the intervention, which have been shown to last up to 7-month follow-up in the long term. And lastly, as I had mentioned briefly, we did see quite significant attrition. So this resulted in a majority of the participants that we were able to track down and collect data from were actually still in school. So that was easier to be able to reach them. But then the ones who had graduated from school was a bit harder to track them down. So it was hard to investigate certain livelihood outcomes, such as, were they able to get a job or such things, because they were still in school. So yeah, that brings me to the end of the presentation.